Hey, so I think we're going to run out of time
Yes.
before we were going to get to unloading modules from
All
memory
right.
when working with sprites. Do we have time for that, or is that
I think so, actually. I'm almost out of voice, but this is such a simple topic.
you're
Let me
almost
just
out of
tell
voice?
you.
You have a whole
Yeah,
can. You had a whole can of voice, and it's almost gone.
yeah, I gotta. That's right. My can of voice is almost gone. All right. So people following along, you're gonna find this code on my GitHub under Corona Geek Hangouts, Hangout 129. Under this, you'll find a folder called Composer Scene Manager, and I'm going to talk about now is the subfolder, the project 8, Objects and Modules. Now, Eric Kincaid, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, asked an interesting question. He was having problems managing his sprites in Composer. If I remember correctly, the specific problem he had was making sure that the sprites were managed by Composer in such that they could be removed when he didn't need them and would be ensured to be on screen when he needed them. So I went and I answered that question, I believe. But as I was answering it, I considered one additional case, and so I just want to point that out to you. So if we're looking here, the one thing I want to point out is that if you're doing a project that uses a lot of sprites or a lot of, it's only going to be sprites. So you're using a lot of sprites, and you're loading a lot of sprite sheets into memory. Let's say every one of your sprite sheets is 4K by 4K, the maximum size, the big ones. You can only get so many of these loaded into memory on an iPad, let's say 2, as a good example. I think the number you can load into memory is, I want to say 5 or 6 before you run into memory problems, specifically texture memory problems. So you're doing a storybook, you're doing a magazine, you're doing something where you're only going to be showing some of these sprites at any one time. You don't need them all. But as you progress in your story, you load one file, it loads the sprites, you use them, you move on to the next scene, you load some more. If you don't do anything to clean up, what's going to happen is eventually you're going to hit that limit and you're going to run out of memory and the app's going to crash, it's going to start acting badly. Something bad is going to happen. So what you need to do is manage the sprites in a module. So you load them up, you initialize them, you do all the stuff you need to get ready to display them and use them. And then later when you want to clean that folder up, you need to know how to, not that folder, that module, you need to know how to do it. So if you look under folder 8, in the scripts subfolder, there is a file here called sprite module best.lua, which I'll load up. And what I do, hopefully I got this right. Yes. What I do here is I give you a very simple example where the top part can pretty much be ignored. It's just composer stuff to fit it into this project. On line 12, I create a table called sprite module. And then
We don't
on
see your
line
screen.
54,
We don't see your screen if you're sharing your screen.
oh, that I'm talking to my face here, which is not what we want to do. Okay, backing up. Sprite module best, line 12. I'm starting to create my module. Local sprite module, a table. For people who don't remember, a module is nothing more than a Lua file that contains a table, and then you attach to that table some fields, which may be pointers to function, references to functions, or content of some type, variable names, etc., etc. And then, as the very last line in your file, you return a reference to that table, and then you can require sprite module best, return this table, and then you can reference everything that's in it. It's a way to load it up somewhere else. It'll always stay in memory. All of this stuff that we just created here will always be in memory, and we'll be able to access it off of that reference. This is what you're doing when you do like require JSON. Local JSON equals, let me just type it out so people can see what I'm saying. Local JSON equals require JSON. The first time I do this, what Lua is going to do, it's going to load up the JSON library, it's going to initialize it in memory, store it someplace, and then it's going to return a reference to the table, which is what is created inside this file, and store it in here. And then JSON would have some JSON dot something something function or JSON something something variable, and I can access it. And that's the concept behind modules. It's very simple, just returning a table. So back to the topic here. We create our module, line 12, skip over all this other stuff here, which is just prep code for me doing the work. And then I create a module called, a function called init. And what this function does is it creates a options table. It creates a graphics sheet, and I won't go into what these are. You have to know how the sprites work. But people who are familiar with creating sprites know that you need an options sheet, an options table, that is, the sprite sheet itself, and then some options on how it is run, which is sometimes people call these, I can't remember.
Like the number of frames and where you want to start, and stuff like that.
You give names to the animations,
okay,
and how many frames they have and how fast they run. And I'm doing a very, very simple one. One animation that just runs over and over from frame 1 to frame 8 or 9. It takes 1 second to do that, and it just runs forever. So I initialize. You'll notice that I didn't have local here in front, so that means that I've created these higher up, line 20 to 22. I have local variables to store these in. When they get initialized after .init, the function is called. Those will always be present in memory. They'll be stored in memory. So that means if I want to destroy them later, I need to clean them up. So the takeaway from this discussion is that I've created a additional function on this module called destroy, and what it does is it nils out those variables so that they can be garbage collected. We talked about this previously. And then what it does is it will look for the actual module as stored by Lua, and modules are stored in package.loaded, and it will nil that out. It will also nil out the global if it was created. Some modules will also create, for example, the way Corona works is they have a module called display, which is always loaded, and it can be found in the global variable display. So we need to clear that out too. And so it clears out the module as it is loaded in 2 locations, and now Lua is free to garbage collect this. This little tiny piece of code here allows us to subsequently unload all of the work that we did.
Could something like that be modified into a generic function?
There's I stole this from a generic solution called unrequire, which is really what this is. What this little step here is the opposite of require.
Okay.
But the distinction here is because I knew that the way I packaged and prepped my data, that I also needed to clear these 3 variables. So I think that people will look at this, and if they take their time, they will understand what I am doing and how this can be used to completely clear the module.
Okay.
All right, and so that's pretty much it.
That's it. Okay, so download the code and walk through it and understand what's going on and use it in your projects.